The engine cut off at 1:47 in the morning. That is the detail nobody remembers, because nobody was supposed to be there to see it. The street was a secondary road in the Brooklyn neighborhood of São Paulo, just a few kilometers from Interlagos, still wet from the rain that had fallen earlier that evening. It was a quiet street, the kind that only existed at that hour in the way that empty stages exist. Present, but waiting. And on the sidewalk, half hidden behind a concrete utility pole, with a cardboard square underneath him and a plastic bag tucked against his ribs, there was a boy. He was around 8 years old. He had no shoes. He was asleep. The Ferrari Testarossa had been moving slowly through the neighborhood. Not the slow of someone lost, but the slow of someone who was not yet ready to stop moving. The car was red. Of course it was red. Everything about that night, in the memory of those who would later piece it together, seemed to insist on the color red. The taillights, the upholstery, the traffic light on the corner that had been stuck on red for the better part of an hour. And then the engine went quiet, and a man stepped out onto the street, and the night became something else entirely. If you are watching this and you have never heard what happened next, stay with me, because what this story is actually about is not the 8 minutes on that sidewalk. It is what those 8 minutes built over the following 10 years. And if you believe that a single human gesture, witnessed by almost no one, can become the foundation of an entire life, then this story was made for you. The man who stepped out of the Ferrari was 31 years old. He had won 3 Formula One World Championships. He had driven in 162 Grand Prix races and won 41 of them. He had just, less than 12 hours earlier, won his home race at Interlagos for the first time in his career. A race that had reduced grown men in the stands to tears. A race in which he had lost the use of the 3rd and 5th gears in the final laps and had driven the last stretch of Interlagos shifting manually. His right hand working the lever while his left fought to keep the McLaren MP4/6 on the tarmac. When they pulled him from the car on the cool-down lap, he could barely hold the trophy. Ron Dennis, his team principal, had to help him lift it. The photograph from that moment shows a man who had gone somewhere the rest of the world could not follow him and come back carrying something too heavy to hold alone. His name was Ayrton Senna da Silva. He had been born in São Paulo on the 21st of March, 1960. He had grown up in a wealthy family in the Santana neighborhood of this same city, the middle child of Milton and Nede Senna. He had known from the time he was 4 years old that he would race cars. He had also known, with the same quiet certainty, that his sister Viviane would later describe as one of the defining qualities of his character, that Brazil was broken in a way that the world did not fully see, and that someone had to start fixing it. He had grown up in a city that held both worlds inside it simultaneously, the São Paulo of sparkling condominiums and private security and imported cars, and the São Paulo of cardboard on wet sidewalks and children who slept in the open because there was no other option. Ayrton Senna had moved between these two worlds every day of his life. He had never learned to look away from the second one. On the night of March the 24th, 1991, 3 days after his 31st birthday, and less than 24 hours after winning the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos, he was driving alone through Brooklyn because he was not ready to go back to the apartment. That was the part his security team would later describe with the careful frustration of people who had stopped being surprised. He did this. He drove. When the weight of a day was too much to process in a room, he got into a car and let the road hold some of it for a while. He saw the boy from roughly 30 meters away. He slowed. He stopped. He turned the engine off. The boy's name was Gabriel. He was 8 years old, and he had been living on the streets of the Brooklyn and Moama neighborhoods for approximately 4 months, since the sequence of events that had removed him from his home in a way that children often have no language for and adults rarely bother to ask about. He did not know what a Ferrari was. He knew the car was red and loud, and that it had gone quiet, and that a man in a white shirt had gotten out and was walking toward him with the careful deliberateness of someone who did not want to frighten him. Senna crouched down. He did not stand over the boy. He crouched so that his eyes were level with Gabriel's, the way you do when you are trying to speak to someone rather than at them. What was said in those 8 minutes has never been fully reconstructed. Gabriel would, years later, describe fragments of it, that the man had asked him his name, that the man had asked him if he was hungry, that the man had given him money, not carelessly the way people sometimes threw coins from car windows, but with both hands, pressing the notes into Gabriel's palms and folding the boy's fingers over them, that the man had taken off his own jacket, a dark blue jacket that still had the smell of the race in it, the rubber and fuel and sweat of a world that had nothing to do with this sidewalk, and placed it over Gabriel's shoulders. That the man had said something before leaving. Gabriel would spend years trying to find the exact words. What he remembered, in the imprecise way that children remember the things that matter most to them, was the shape of it. It was something about Brazil, about how Brazil was full of people who deserved better than what it was giving them, about how things were going to change, and that Gabriel was going to be part of that change, whether he knew it yet or not. Then Senna stood up, walked back to the car, started the engine, and drove away. Gabriel watched the red taillights until they disappeared around the corner. He was still holding the money with both hands. He slept that night with the jacket pulled over his face. He did not know the man's name. He did not need to. He knew, in the specific, wordless way, that children know things that adults have forgotten how to feel, that something had happened on that sidewalk that was not random, that he had been seen, that he had been spoken to as though he mattered, that one person in the entire city of São Paulo, at 1:47 in the morning, had turned off an engine and gotten out of a red car and decided that he was worth 8 minutes. It took Gabriel 2 more years to get off the streets. He was helped by a woman named Dona Clara, who ran a house for abandoned children in the Vila Madalena neighborhood. He was enrolled in a public school in 1993. He was a difficult student in the beginning, not because he lacked intelligence, but because the machinery of formal education had no instructions for a child who had learned everything he knew from survival. He fell behind. He caught up. He fell behind again. And then, in 1994, something happened that changed the direction of everything he was building. On the 1st of May, 1994, Ayrton Senna died at the Tamburello corner of the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari in Imola, Italy, during the San Marino Grand Prix. He was 34 years old. His Williams FW16 hit the concrete wall at 211 kilometers per hour. The suspension column penetrated his helmet. He was airlifted to the Maggiore Hospital in Bologna, where he was declared dead at 6:17 in the afternoon local time. Brazil declared 3 days of national mourning. An estimated 3 million people lined the streets of São Paulo for his funeral procession. The Brazilian parliament suspended its sessions. The president wept on national television. Formula One had lost drivers before, but it had never lost one like this. Not one who had been both a champion and a symbol. Not one who had carried an entire country's sense of itself on the number 27 of his helmet. Gabriel was 11 years old when Senna died. He learned about it the way everyone in Brazil learned about it, through the television at the house in Vila Madalena, in the middle of an afternoon that was supposed to be ordinary. He did not yet know the name of the man from the sidewalk. He had never connected the man in the white shirt with the man in the yellow helmet. That connection would come later, slowly, the way important things come. 6 months after Senna's death, his sister Viviane founded the Instituto Ayrton Senna in São Paulo on the 20th of November, 1994. It was the organization that Ayrton had spoken to her about just weeks before Imola, the structured form of everything he had been doing privately for years. The quiet donations, the anonymous help, the money pressed into hands on sidewalks that no one was supposed to know about. Vivian later told journalists that it was not an organized or planned thing while Ayrton was alive. Nothing was recorded. Nothing was announced. It was, she said, an emotional response to what he saw, what he knew, and what he was shown. Gabriel found his way to one of the Instituto's programs in 1997 when he was 14 years old. It was through the school in Vila Madalena, which had begun partnering with the Instituto's literacy and skills programs. He began learning in a different way there. Not the rigid repetition of a classroom that was not designed for him, but something that acknowledged what he already knew and built from there. He learned to read with a proficiency that surprised his teachers. He learned, slowly and then quickly, that the version of himself that had slept on cardboard in Brooklyn was not the whole of what he was. It was just where he had started. He became a volunteer at the Instituto Ayrton Senna in 2001. He was 18 years old. On the day he walked into the headquarters in the Pinheiros district of São Paulo and explained who he was and what he wanted to do, one of the coordinators asked him what had first connected him to the Instituto. Gabriel thought about this for a moment, and then he told the story. The red car, the white shirt, the man who had crouched down on the sidewalk and spoken to him with both eyes open, the jacket, the money held with both hands, the words about Brazil. The coordinator was quiet for a moment. She asked him if he knew who the man was. Gabriel said he had always assumed it was someone important. She told him the date had been March the 24th, 1991. She told him that on that date, Ayrton Senna had won the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos for the first time in his career. She told him that Senna had been known to drive alone through São Paulo late at night after races. She told him about the private donations, the secret generosity, the pattern of individual human gestures that Vivian had described as an emotional response to what he saw. Gabriel did not say anything for a long time. When he finally spoke, he said, "I kept the jacket for 2 years, until it fell apart. I knew it was important. I just did not know why yet." There is something that Ayrton Senna said in a speech in São Paulo in 1993, 1 year before his death, that has been quoted so many times it has become almost invisible through repetition. He said, "If we want to change something, we need to start with the children." It is the kind of sentence that sounds like a policy position when you read it in a report. It sounds different when you understand that the man who said it was also the man who got out of a red Ferrari at 1:47 in the morning on a wet street in Brooklyn and crouched down so his eyes were level with a child who had no shoes. The Instituto Ayrton Senna was founded in November of 1994. Over the following 3 decades, it invested more than $80 million in social programs across Brazil. It reached more than 36 million children. It trained more than 300,000 teachers. It operated in 17 states and more than 600 cities. The Senna family forewent over $500 million in licensing and image rights, directing those resources instead to the Instituto's programs. Every product bearing Ayrton's name or his sister Vivian's character Senna, every bicycle and poster and children's book, generated money that went back into classrooms where children like Gabriel were being given the thing that Senna believed was the beginning of everything: the chance to become what they were supposed to be. Gabriel worked as a volunteer at the Instituto for 3 years. He then trained as an educator through one of the Instituto's teacher development programs. He worked in the public school system in São Paulo For more than 15 years, he has, by his own count, taught approximately 400 children to read. He has never been able to fully verify that the man on the sidewalk was Ayrton Senna. There are no photographs of that night. There are no witnesses. There is only the shape of the story, which fits the shape of the man the way a key fits a lock it was made for. The late-night driving, the private generosity, the crouching down, the both hands, the words about Brazil and children and change. Frank Williams said, in an interview given in the weeks after Senna's death in 1994, "If you want a summary of Ayrton Senna, he was actually a greater man out of the car than in it." Out of the car, standing on a wet sidewalk in Brooklyn, at 1:47 in the morning, with a child he would never see again, and a jacket he would never get back, and 8 minutes that he did not announce to anyone because he was not doing it to be seen. He was doing it because there was a boy on a piece of cardboard, and the engine was already off, and the only question was whether he got out of the car. He got out of the car. 10 years later, the boy came back. And the thing that Ayrton Senna built, not the championships, not the records, not the laps that no one should have been able to drive, but the actual thing he built, the real one, the one that is still standing. That is what brought him there. The Instituto Ayrton Senna is still operating today in cities across Brazil. If you believe that what one person does in 8 minutes on a sidewalk can still be producing results 30 years later, then you already understand what this story was trying to say. And if you want to see more stories like this one, stories about the people who change things not by being famous, but by getting out of the car, make sure you are subscribed. The next one is worth staying for.